Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio. This week I am joined by Natalie Mackenzie, who is a cognitive health expert for business owners with a background in psychology, neuropsychology and business strategy. Natalie works with founders, leaders and entrepreneurs to optimize their cognitive performance, overcome decision fatigue and avoid burnout through blending cognitive science and practical business frameworks to also look after brain health for later life. Natalie is a sought-after media expert, regularly sharing her expertise on cognition in publications such as The Guardian, The Telegraph, and The Independent, and many more. This is a really, really interesting conversation, so let's get stuck in. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio. Natalie Mackenzie, excited to have you on the show today.
I am very excited. It's been a long time in the making, hasn't it? But here we are.
It has, because of course we met in LA and I've had some brilliant guests on the show from being on that retreat, and you are the latest in a line of many esteemed guests from that trip. But you are probably a bit of a different guest in terms of some of your expertise and experience and how you approach visibility, because you are like the scientist. And I know that you talk about how brains respond to things, and I guess it would be really helpful to understand how you think brains actually respond to being visible. So if we think about when people are speaking on a stage or they're posting online or they're being in the spotlight in some way, tell us about the impact that would have on our brains.
So I've worked in brain injury for 24 years. So my background is psychology and cognitive neuropsychology. So I come at it from a different angle. So my experience comes from working with injured brains, seeing what needs to happen to rehabilitate, but that also leads into things like neuroplasticity, habit formation, trauma work, emotional regulation. And now the last few years, what I've done is I've not amended it, but I've moved into cognitive strategy in business and helping people understand how their brains work in terms of business, visibility, marketing, all of that. So I have a very, very different angle. So it's a bit of psychology, neuropsychology, neuroscience. I'm a cognitive therapist, rehab therapist, that is, rather than CBT. So yeah, I have a very different spin on everything. And for me, in answer to your question, everything that you do in business, whether it's visibility or strategy, whatever it may be, starts with brain behavior from a neuro perspective. So obviously a lot of people look at it from more kind of a psychological approach in terms of like our behavior, but I go a bit more granular in terms of actually what's happening. So yeah, in terms of visibility, everything that we do comes down to cognition and your strengths and weaknesses of how your brain works effectively. So we all have a cognitive profile, like you do a body profile. You have one side of your body's weaker than the other type thing. You know, you've got a leading leg or a dominant hand. It's the same with your brain. You have things that you're good at, strengths and things that you're not so good at. And also our experiences as our brains develop also have an impact on how we behave as adults, and also how we behave gender-wise, where we are in our cycles for women. All of that plays a part. And I go really deep and go, well, let's look at literally day to day, week on week, quarter on quarter, how your brain is behaving and performing. Because if you've got things like, let's go really kind of basic, if you don't understand your brain and cognitive health and do things like prioritize sleep, for instance, you're automatically going to put your prefrontal cortex under pressure, which is where you do your executive functioning, your decision making, your planning, your organization. So when it comes to things like strategy and visibility, if you aren't functioning well from a prefrontal perspective, you can't put things in place effectively. If you don't perform so well because of, say, chronic stress or potentially burnout or being too busy, which we've touched on before, you again impair things like your attention, again, your decision making, how you show up, how your personality shows up, how you story tell, how you build kind of connections with people. It's all linked to all of those bits.
So if you were someone that was really nervous about speaking on a stage, for example, which a lot of people are, I would say probably most people are rather than not, are there some ways that you can almost trick your brain into being more confident?
Yeah, confidence is a big one. So you may have heard before things like, when your amygdala takes over, your kind of emotional side takes over, that fight or flight response. That's a lot of what you see in people that don't like public speaking. I talk all the time I do presentations all the time, and I love it when I'm up there, but the anticipation I hate it. My amygdala literally takes over, and all my that prefrontal decision making, reasonable thinking goes offline, and I go into, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, what the hell am I thinking, who am I to be standing up there, all of that. And I've done it for years, but it's still that kind of like, your amygdala and your emotional responses really do take a driving seat when you feel that you're in that fear. But we know that things like not having so much of what's called the negativity bias around, I can't do this because the outcome will be this, that kind of positive affirmations. And I'm not that it's woo. So anyone that says, things like that are woo, they're not woo, but things like, positive manifestation and visualization do have a real place from a neuroscience perspective. If you can visualize yourself on stage, doing well, having a great reception, having people clap you, things like that, we know that sets down more positive neural pathways that help you feel more confident. The other thing that I always like people to think about is that actually the things that you find hard, the things that make you nervous, the things that you avoid are the things you should be doing for brain health. The harder you find something, the harder you have to work at it. And ergo, the harder your brain has to work at setting down these new neural pathways. But the harder it is, the better the outcome. And then what happens is, because you've done it, so something that you thought was really hard rather than easy, because you've done it, you've got good feedback, you've had a dopamine hit, your brain learns the reward-based behavior of doing something you found difficult. So in many ways, if you're someone that finds it hard, great. Then you're actually benefiting more than someone that finds it easy.
That's so interesting. I never thought about it like that. I mean, I certainly won't be applying that to doing things that I find hard, that I don't enjoy, that I don't need to do, like math and finance and stuff like that. So one of the things that I quite often speak to people about is being consistent. So when we're talking about things like LinkedIn, for example, or loads of different things that make you visible, we talk about consistency. And consistency is often framed as discipline. But what's happening in the brain when someone struggles to stay consistent?
So there's a number of things going on. One, if we go back to that bit that I said earlier about people that are in chronic stress, too busy, burnout, don't plan, don't prioritize, aren't structured, they're actually not in good frontal behavior to be consistent already. You're already on the back foot because you don't have literally the space to be able to put those processes in place. So when we look at consistency and which effectively is habit formation, the parts of the brain that work on habit formation need it often repeated, consolidated for at least 28 days, at least 3 months really. And what you often see is that people stop too early. So it's not that they haven't got to the habit, it's because they gave up earlier because they didn't see results. And that's, again, understanding that actually you have to stick with things for much longer than you think you need to. But again, if you're really busy, tired, poor sleep, decision fatigue, potentially close to burnout, you can't access that thought to say, this isn't working because I've not been doing it consistently. And you go into that reactive amygdala behavior and you go, sod it, I'm not doing it. And you stop being consistent.
Yeah. And I guess I can think of examples around exercise, diet, where that would be the case as well. You don't lose a stone in a week, so it doesn't work.
And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And I'm not always consistent, and I often have a hissy fit when things don't work. And and I know all this stuff, right? Whether it's stuff that you're putting in your body, a habit, a strategy, people give up far too quickly when they don't see results. Say you have like a glass full of all the decisions. We have like 35 35,000 decisions we make a day subconsciously. It's a massive amount, right? I mean, you even think, I mean, I don't know who on earth sat there and tagged the 35,000 decisions, but let's say you've got all those to make in a day. When you start being consistent, you move into what's called habituation. So the effort and decision that you need to do it lessens. Therefore, the decisions that you have to make, i.e., should I or should I not take this, or should I or should I not post, or should I or should I not say X on a podcast, you're reducing the decisions that you have to make. Therefore, you're reducing the amount in your glass, and therefore you've got more space for more important things. So, for instance, like Steve Jobs and Barack Obama always wore the same clothes simply because it was something else they didn't have to think about, right? Little things like that. So when you habituate to things or you automate things, like even if it's your social posts, you're reducing the decision burden. Therefore, you will reduce decision fatigue, and then you'll have more space for more of the cognitive things that you need for higher level thinking, for more strategy, for more critical thinking, all of that. That's why things like that are important.
Your advice that we should look for opportunities within our routines and daily life of just simplifying things.
Oh, just simplify things. Everyone makes things so damn complicated now because we're flooded with options. Just need to go online and, whether you're in chat or Google or whatever, and ask a question, even if it's like, what's a good scheduling platform? And you'll have pages of things to choose from. And the decisions around which one you choose, which is most expensive, when actually in that time, you could have just got on and done it in a really simple way. And people, I think, often overcomplicate a lot of things. And one of the first things I always talk about is just going back to basics. Simplify everything where you can. Automate where you can, but only the base level stuff. Keep the higher level critical thinking for your brain, because if you don't use it, you will lose it.
You're really getting lots of thoughts whirring away in my brain around things or habits that I've had in the past that have made me feel more on top of life. Things like, planning out what I'm going to wear for the week. I used to do that on a Sunday. I used to batch cook so I had healthy, nutritious food for the week. I always just think, why do I get out of the habit of these things? It's frustrating.
It's often because, and it's a bit of a paradox, because they made you feel better, you didn't realize when you were doing it that they were making you feel better. So they didn't become important anymore. So they went to the bottom of the to-do list, and you would think, oh, I don't really need to do that, because you didn't have a tangible thing in front of your face to say, this helps me. And this is why hindsight is a wonderful thing. The saying is true when people go, oh yeah, I did feel better. And that's where, people that enjoy things like, I'd love to be able to do it, but, I will wholly admit that I don't have time. Things like journaling are really helpful for stuff like that, because it does give you that time to reflect on how your habits are making you feel. And it also gives you a thing that you wrote, that you did yourself with your thoughts, that told you how much better you felt with them, rather than someone else saying to you, well, why don't you go and do that because you used to feel better? You'd be like, yeah, whatever. Don't tell me what to do.
If we simplified our lives, we'd have time for all these things that make us feel better. So we should absolutely do that. So, when you talked before about that sort of fight or flight, and obviously people feel stressed day to day from all sorts of things, but have you got any sort of cognitive techniques that help to regulate that stress response and perform better when the spotlight's on? So we're feeling nervous, we're walking onto the stage. Are there any practical things that we should be doing in that moment or in the lead up to that moment?
I'm glad you said at the end there, in the lead up, because that's where it comes, if I'm honest. Far too many people leave things right before they need them, rather than thinking about them before. So things like we were saying earlier about that visualization stuff, actually the mindful nervous system work, which a lot more people are looking at now, that nervous system regulation, doing those things way before you've got the event. And again, and I put my hands up, I've got something coming up next week that I know now I should be kind of like regulating myself about. I'm not, because I'm really busy, but I know what's going to happen. I know that I will be able to kind of regulate myself. But for some people, there is a lot, and again, if you do the nervous system work, things that you can physically do before you go on stage, like bits of box breathing, like grounding yourself, like getting outside the morning of something like that, ensuring the night before you've had quality sleep. But what often happens is that people who are worried about things like speaking on stage won't sleep well the night before, and they'll go to bed and they'll ruminate and go, oh my God, I'm not going to get any sleep. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be really, really tired. And you have this kind of confirmation bias that you're not going to have a good night's sleep. If that happens to any of you, don't worry, you'll be fine. What often happens is people think, and I will have a tiny rant here about things like Apple Watches, which I do wear, but not for that reason, and things, sleep trackers. When people wake up ready for a presentation and look at their watch or tracker and it says that they've had a bad night's sleep, ignore it. It doesn't tell you anything. People don't actually think about how they feel. They look at tech to tell them how they feel. But also that goes for other things. Like, and again, if you're on your way to a talk and you're nervous, don't start going on Instagram looking at comments that people have made on your content that have upset you before, that are going to dent your confidence a little bit more. Think sensibly is often just the thing. Don't do things that are going to make you feel worse about yourself. Do the things that are going to make you feel better about yourself in that lead up to doing something. But everybody's different. Some people like to be G'd up. Some people like, pep talk. Some people like the breathing. Some people, I'm like, don't talk to me. Don't tell me it's going to be okay. Just don't talk to me.
And I guess this is where things like journaling probably do come into play as well, because if you were journaling on an evening or something, you've probably forgotten the sleep score that we've potentially put us in a strop in the morning, but then gone through that experience and it's in real time. Therefore, you can still remember it and jot some stuff down. In terms of obviously you're running a business and you're aware of the need to stay visible. What do you do personally that is maintaining your cognitive health while you're doing all of these things?
I try and practice what I preach. So I run a very busy bricks and mortar business, which is in a very different sector to my online businesses. So my visibility strategy is different for each company. And that took me a long time to get my head around, if I'm honest. I'm in a health and social care sector. 5 years ago, if anyone said to me, you're going to have to take the business online and do like social media on it, I'd be like, absolutely not. And what am I doing every day? I'm doing it. But again, I have to plan and strategize everything. I have to automate wherever possible, because probably very similar to you, when you're running things like that, you can't rely on having the time available to do it, because certainly in health and social care and in the brain injury business that I run, we have catastrophes and chaos every day. My office is like a revolving door. If I didn't schedule things and be very clear about what day is for what, and I physically have had to take myself away from my main office 2 days a week because I can't actually get the work done because there's so much of a revolving door just because I'm physically in the office. So changing your environment, I think, can make a massive difference. But also what my environment looks like. I no longer work on my desk because it's so messy. I'm very, very messy. And that literally impacts my cognitive function because I get distracted. So I have to put myself in an environment where there's nothing that can distract me. I time block. I plan at the beginning of the day, literally time block things. I set timer. I've got one of these actually, one of these timers that actually means, because I work much better with kind of like a 45-minute hyper focus. But also I'm a little bit of a geek. And because I know about things like sleep and circadian rhythms, I actually plan my tasks based on my peak of my circadian rhythms, which sounds like I'm an absolute loser and a real geek, but it is just something that it works. So for instance, to explain that, we have these 90-minute cycles and your peaks are kind of like halfway through that. If you start doing something quite complicated, like you don't like maths or finance, neither do I really. But if I start looking at all my financials in a dip, it'll be much harder for me. If I start to do something like to start some social media posts and scheduling in a dip, it won't go very well. So I have to do it when I'm in a peak. And I know that based on when I've woken up and what my rhythm is. And I actually plan my tasks around that, which is really geeky, isn't it?
Yeah, but if it works and it makes sense, and you need to be the poster girl for this stuff, so we all need to listen to you.
Don't get me wrong, I don't always get it right. That's the thing. Don't ever think that even when you've got all these systems in place that they'll always work, because life is life, right?
But you need to work out what works for you and do the best that you can, and try and be as consistent as you can. This is such an interesting topic. I feel like there's a lot more that I could ask you about, so maybe we need to do a part 2. But if anyone watching or listening hasn't come across you before, where's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, The Cognitive Strategist on Instagram and Facebook, and also my website is thecognitivestrategist.com. I'm also on LinkedIn as well as Natalie Mackenzie.
Great. We will pop some links to all of those in the show notes to make it super easy for people to find you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening. If you're serious about growing your profile, take our free profile assessment quiz to see where you're at right now and get hints and tips on how to improve your score. You'll find the link to the quiz in the show notes. If you've enjoyed the episode, it would be mint if you'd subscribe, like, and leave a review. See you next Monday.